Feels like a long time ago since we spoke to you after the defeat by Brighton away. How have the 2 weeks been? Because I imagine you would have sooner had another game.
Yeah, I think I said afterwards, my preference would always be to play again after a disappointing result. But it wasn't to be, so we've come back here and worked well, I think, with the players that we had left with us. Around about 12 players initially. Lads have been good, training's been good, and now we're ready for the next game.
And I know you want to look ahead to Brentford, but I'm sure you've looked back at the season so far. What conclusions have you reached when you've viewed those 4 games and that first month?
I think, rather than look at it as a whole, I think it's been sort of highs and lows within it. I think performance against Liverpool was very good for the majority. Obviously, the Aston Villa game is very good. Manchester City was close, although we probably weren't at our best. Probably the big disappointment was the Brighton performance. But whether that was a consequence of the Liverpool game, I don't know, where maybe we never recovered from that setback at the end of the game.
And looking ahead to this weekend and Brentford at St James's Park, given what's happened already this season, how much importance are you placing on this fixture? Because it could set you up nicely for a big few weeks ahead in the league and in Europe. Yeah,
I think it's a game obviously we want to do well in, and I think we know and we understand the game that we're in. But I don't want to build it up any more than it is, really. It's a game that we have to approach in the right way. It's a difficult game, very dangerous opponent. They've got good skills and a good way of playing, and got their obvious threats. But for us, we have to return to our highest level of performance. And I think if we do, then I'll back us to get the job done.
And when you think about how you played for the majority of that match against Liverpool, when it is a big game and you've had a tough start, but you'd have to throw Brentford in there as well because, as you say, they're a good team. That can bring out the best in your team and your players, can't it, when the challenge is there? Yeah,
I think that's how we have to be. The challenges aren't going to go away this year. All through pre-season we had tough fixtures. We've had tough fixtures at the start of the season. But with the competitions we're in, there are no easy games. So you have to respond, and we have to grow to the challenge. And as I say, for me, the only disappointment of the 4 games has been Brighton. There's been a lot of highs in there, but we haven't necessarily seen the result of that work. But I don't lose faith in the group at all.
I'll ask you about a few players who've had injuries and knocks. Firstly, Sven Botman wasn't available at Brighton. Will he be back this weekend?
Possibly, yeah. He's trained this week. So fingers crossed for Sven. We'll see how he feels today.
And Sandro Tonali didn't play for Italy in midweek. The Italian media said there was a slight injury. What is the situation there?
Yeah, I think he felt his thigh in training, so he's come back in. He's had a scan. There's a slight injury there. It's nothing serious or too long, but we'll wait and see whether he's available this weekend.
And Elliot Anderson was in the Scotland squad and then withdrew, citing an injury. Will he be in your squad this weekend?
We hope so. Fingers crossed Elliot will make it, yeah.
I just want to ask you finally about your goalkeeper Nick Pope, because there was a little bit of criticism, I think, from pundits after the Brighton match, particularly around the first and maybe the second goal. He's obviously someone that's been so important to you, came back from an injury over the summer. What's your view on that and the comments after the Brighton game and what happened leading to the first couple of goals?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the comments, and I just reiterate my feelings on Nick. I think he's a top goalkeeper, an outstanding player. For us last year, he was immense. Big contributing factor to the fact we had such a good defensive record and were so consistent as a team. And it's the nature of a goalkeeper's job. I'm afraid whenever goals go in, you're always judged and looked at. But he's a player of huge quality for us.
Thanks for that. Keith?
Just a couple from me, Eddie. You were asked about Elliot Anderson there. It sounds as though he may have a bit of a tug of war on his hands between Scotland and England. Where is he at the moment?
I think that's a difficult one for me to comment on, Keith. I think that's for Elliot really to discuss. All I say is a great professional. He's very driven and motivated to do well in his career, and he's got a really bright future ahead of him. So whatever he decides in the future, that's I'll support and back that.
And a few reports over the last week or so that Bruno's close to agreeing a new contract. Is there any update on that at all?
No, I don't think so. I think discussions are still ongoing, but I don't think it's something that's necessarily affecting Bruno in any way. This is done sort of without his input, between his representatives and the football club, and hopefully there'll be a good outcome.
How has he been since he returned? I know you might not have seen him yet, you might have seen him for a day or so. He's obviously had a positive experience away with Brazil. How has he been since he returned?
Yeah, he's been very good. He's been very positive. I think he had a great experience, 2 games. I think he performed really well in both. So he's come back with a renewed spring in the step, which is great for us because he's such a pivotal figure for us. He's a catalyst for a lot of our good work, good football, and we need him at his very best.
And I just want to ask you about Steve Harper. Some bad news over the international break about his health. How is he at the moment?
Yeah, Harps is doing well. Very shocked to hear the news, and all our thoughts are with him and his family. He's been a real tower of strength for me personally since coming to the football club. He's been someone that supported me and tried to educate me and help me really on everything Newcastle, and he's Newcastle through and through, and we wish him a speedy recovery.
Thank you. Cheers.
Andy. Morning, Eddie. Just on Steve's news, does that kind of put everything into perspective when you hear something shocking like that? Because it came out of nowhere.
I think it always does, Andy. I think, my initial thoughts were one of shock because I'd seen him, I think, a couple of days beforehand, and he seemed in great health, great spirits, and suddenly you hear that news, and it does put everything into perspective. Life is more important than anything, and he's a great person. First and foremost, he's got a lovely family, and we just wish him well and a speedy return, and hopefully he, will recover with no problems.
Speaking of perspective on the pitch, last year Newcastle had 1 win from their opening 7 games. So how important a word is perspective when it comes down to the football as well in the start of the season? Yeah,
I think from my side, I have to detach myself from everything and look at it for what it is. I think we've played 4 games. We haven't performed well in 1. We've been a little bit inconsistent in the others, but it's not all bad. There's been a lot of good in there, and I think I have to retain faith in everything that we do, the group of players we have. It's a long season. We know there's lots of twists and turns to come. We're going to be stretched more than probably any other season this year, so we have to deal with those challenges. It was never going to be easy for us. So, I'm very calm in one sense, but also anxious to succeed in another and determined to try and win football matches.
There's been lots of talk about the midfield and the balance necessarily in the midfield. How long does it take to kind of get a balance in a new midfield, and what signs are you seeing from that midfield, especially of Sandro, of Bruno and of Joe Linton, that things are starting to click there?
Well, I think if you'd looked at us after the Aston Villa game, you'd have gone, there's no time needed. It was almost natural. It was a thing of beauty, really, how our midfield performed that day. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, and suddenly people will just dissect things and have a different opinion, and that's where it's important that I don't fall into that trap, really. We just do the work on the training pitch to try and make sure the team performs at its best. There will be an adapting period for Sandro, without a doubt, and there was for Bruno, and there is for a lot of our new players where they have to understand the dynamics of the team, but that's just a natural process.
I have to ask you away from the football about the Great Northern obviously starting it. The likes of Sir Bobby and Kev have started it as well. What was that like for you as an experience, despite it being 24 degrees and in a black suit?
I slightly misread the weather, to be honest. And my arms are probably just about recovered now. But it was a good experience, apart from a couple of supporters who maybe don't support Newcastle, letting me know what they felt about me. But in the main, it was a brilliant event, and it was great to see people running and healthy, and it was a great day.
I know you've covered injuries. I just want to ask you about one player in particular, Joe Willock. How is he doing, not just physically but mentally as well? I've seen some social media posts from him, and he seems to be very, very upbeat about his recovery.
I haven't seen those, so I don't know what he's put, but he's been away. He's been in Spain, I believe, the last week. Change of environment for him, change of focus for him. He's been pretty good. I think there's obviously been a disappointment there because he's had a couple of setbacks. This injury is an Achilles injury. The one that he sustained originally was a hamstring injury. And the Achilles came out of nowhere. So disappointment for him, but he's such a key player for us. Disappointment for us. But our aim is just to get him back as quickly as possible and back to his best form.
And just finally from me, one on Brentford's. How much of a breath of fresh air have Brentford and Thomas Frank been since they've been in the Premier League? Because it seems like they've been here for ages now.
Yeah, I think they've done very, very well. It's very difficult to one, get promoted to the Premier League, and then two, to solidify your stay in the Premier League. It's very difficult to do, but they've done it in a really good way. They've got their style of play, and very difficult to play against. Got some very good players. So we don't take anything for granted. We know the 2 games we had against them last year were very difficult.
Top man, thanks.
Thank you.
Mark. Hi, Eddie.
Hi.
Brentford's success, do you think it's due to incredibly shrewd recruitment?
Probably a mixture of a lot of things, really. Shrewd recruitment would be one. A brilliant coach who's done amazing things on a consistent basis with the team. They continue to innovate as well. They're always moving the team forward and changing things, and Thomas deserves a lot of credit for the job that he's done.
And unbeaten, even without the goals of Ivan Toney, who's back in training but obviously can't play till January.
Yeah, and I think when you lose a player who's that important to your style and to everything that you do, to still adapt and find a way, they deserve a lot of credit.
But they've still obviously got a lot of threat. I mean, the likes of Mbuemo and Mope, they are a dangerous side.
We don't underestimate them in any way. They've got attacking players that can hurt you. So yeah, we know all about them. We've had a long time to prepare for the game, so I don't think there'll be any surprises. But I think it's about us always. I think we have to make sure that our performance level is as good as it can be.
This was 2 ways of looking at an international break. Given the tough start you've had, could you sort of say to the players, look, we've got the Champions League coming up in midweek, it's going to get very congested, let's take this as a reboot and just, if you like, almost start again?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to do it. I mean, the reality is we were left with a small pool of players for the majority of the 2 weeks, so it's not as if you have your whole squad together where you can maybe reset. We're having to sort of do that for the first time yesterday when we got the group back together. But yeah, we've enjoyed our 2 weeks in terms of the training, and a lot of players that maybe hadn't been at their best fitness-wise, in terms of the guys that maybe had a couple of injuries, have had some good work, and I think they'll be 100% fit now.
And I suppose with the Champions League, you've got to be looking with eagle eyes at sort of who may be struggling, who not to, perhaps to pull off early so that they're okay for Milan.
Now the only focus will be trying to beat Brentford. Milan will take priority once the game's over.
Simon at the back.
Eddie, just on that point, totally heard the focus 100% is on Brentford, but the world changes after the Brentford game. How exciting is that, and how confident are you that you can cope with the travel, the schedule, and everything?
I'm not sure the world changes. I think maybe I get your point though. I think we'll deal with that. It's a slightly longer flight than normal in England, but we've dealt with all kinds of things that are thrown at us previously. That will come into focus at the end of the game. I'm very reluctant to talk about Milan at all today. I think all our energy, and I want the players' focus to be on our next game.
Simon, questions from the floor? Simon? I know you've got a bigger squad than last year, and you've got players who've been really loyal to, delivered for you last season in a very big way. Have you got to be very ruthless in analysing them for this year, and if they dip, then they can move out of the team, and how difficult is that going to be for you to do in reshaping this squad?
Yeah, I think it's always a balance. So of course, I'm not judging anything on last year. I'm judging things on this year. So I judge every performance individually, always based on the last game. I think the difficulty is you go into the Brentford game off the back of the Liverpool game, and the Liverpool game's very deceiving. We've lost the game. But for me, the first half was excellent. It's up there with one of the best we've played since I've been here, against a very good team. So you've got to be very careful then, because really the dynamics of the game changed later in the game. So you've got to be very careful then before making wholesale changes to something that's not broken. And I think I've got to try and make the right decisions. I won't be overly loyal to players that don't perform. That would be foolish of me. So I'll judge it from what I see.
And you've got players like Sean Longstaff who's been moved out of the team, Tonali's come in. Are you, in the past, you've been kind of loyal to players who you've had during the national breaks, who you've worked with for the full 2 weeks, and then you've played them in the next game? Is that something which we can look out for tomorrow?
Yeah, with Sean's situation, Sean was injured during pre-season, so it wasn't a case of Sean was moved out of the team. But I couldn't rate Sean highly enough, and we've missed him since he was injured at the back end of last season. If you remember, it was a big miss for us. So Sean is returning to full fitness, in my opinion, after a period out.
Craig? Morning, Eddie. It's the first time we've seen you here since the window closed, and I think the debate in that time was to sign in players for now or for the future. How hard is that decision for you? Obviously, you look at Tino and Lewis there, probably ones for down the line, as opposed to right now. Was that a big call to make in terms of that sort of split with regards to the nature of the recruitment?
I don't think there's a conscious decision to go down any line. You're looking to recruit the best players that you can, in a sense of who's available, what funds you have, and what positions are the priority. So that's made in conjunction with a lot of people. It's not just a snapshot decision. So I can't give you a sort of a descriptive answer to each individual case, but I'm pleased with the window. I think the squad is a lot stronger, and hopefully we'll see that throughout the season.
And on Bruno as well, I know this was touched on earlier, but how did you assess his opening weeks of the season for Newcastle, and what good will it do in playing the way he did for Brazil?
Well, I think it will hopefully inspire him and just bring his confidence levels back to the very best they can be. I think every player that I've ever met is a confidence player, needs to feel good to play well, and hopefully that will be the thing that sparks Bruno into life for us. I think he's done some really good things again at the start of the season. He's made some valuable contributions, so we hope that this is the thing that sees Bruno return to his very top form.
Thank you.
Scott?
The period that we're going into now, Eddie, obviously it's a whole new challenge in terms of the schedule, in terms of what's coming down the line, everything like that. I mean, you personally, A, how much are you looking forward to that challenge as a manager that you haven't had before, and B, what questions do you think it'll ask you personally that you maybe haven't had to deal with or answer before?
Yeah, I think that's it's a difficult one before you go into a period where you're just going to have a lot of games. I don't see it being a huge difference, to be honest. You're preparing against teams that are from Europe rather than England. For me, the Premier League is the best league in the world. So I think for loads of different reasons, I think the Premier League is an unbelievable league. I love being in it. But now we're going to Europe. It's a different competition, different challenges, but it's still a game of football.
Yeah.
So it's just adapting to the period that we have, really, with the intensity of the games, recovery periods, training being different. The actual game itself is the same.
And you know, there was a theory last season that Newcastle benefited a fair bit from not being in Europe and not really having to change the team that much, always having 3 weeks to be able to train, etc., etc. I mean, how big a difference do you think that makes, and how much of an extra challenge is that this time around?
I'd say it's a huge challenge. I mean, no doubt about that. I'm not underestimating, as you say, the 3 weeks, the time you have to prepare for an opponent. The longer you have, really, the better. If you can train properly with a full group of players, that's even better again. So this will just be different, and we're going to have to find a way, because teams will have a week to prepare for us, and we may have 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So that's just something we'll have to adapt to, and hopefully we'll find a way to win.
Luke?
Eddie, it can be notoriously difficult for managers to admit they've made a mistake. Can you just talk me through the black blazer and black jumper on the hottest day of the year last weekend?
When I got up, it was foggy and it was cold, and I thought, right, I'll make a good decision with the blazer and a tee. It was actually a t-shirt underneath, so I wasn't fully.
Quite hot.
Well, I did get hot, but then you get so hot you can't take your jacket off. As you know, you start sweating and you think, I can't take it off now, so I was stuck, really. That is the full reason.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Pleasure.
And a more serious question. Newcastle can be a very emotional football club. We all know that. How important is it for you to stay level-headed and calm, even when there might be a bit of a storm with that?
Yeah, I think it's one of my strengths. If I'm sort of noting them down, that when things are difficult, that I don't necessarily get swayed by that emotion, and it doesn't mean that you don't care or you're not feeling it, but controlling it is a different thing, and I think that's a strength. So I think you do need to be calm, but calm in a way that you try and make good decisions, and you see things for what they are, not for what people try and create. And that's why I keep labouring the point. It's not all been bad. Yes, the results of the last three games haven't been what we want, but there's been some really good in the performances that we can't lose. Otherwise, you start again from zero. And we've built the team to a point where we've been consistent last year throughout the season. Although there were some dips along the way, we stayed strong throughout the season, and we're going to need to show that again this year. And the challenge this year is totally different to last. So hopefully we can show the qualities we need to come back.
How's Callum Wilson been? Another one who's been away on international break. How has he been? Has he been okay about not starting? I know you notoriously said on the documentary he's not okay, but he handles it. Is he coming into your thinking for a recall?
Yeah, I'd say exactly that. Callum's been really good around the group. He's been very professional. He's been very supportive of his teammates. Underneath that, I know that can't swear, can I? I know he's been eager to play and eager to not play necessarily for himself, but for the team. He wants the team to do well, and he's obviously got his own individual motivations. But I think you saw when he came on against Brighton, he came on in a really good place, scored a really good goal for us, and yeah, of course he's right in the frame.
Thank you.
Lee? Eddie, I know you said you don't want to talk about Milan specifically, but they've got a game as well, haven't they, on Saturday against Inter, so it works both ways.
Well, yeah, looking at Milan, yes, they have a game, so they'll be in the same position we are by the time we meet. But in reference to the point earlier, it was about really the Premier League teams having a week to prepare, and we would have a short time. But that's the reward for what we did last year, is to get into that competition, and I think that's how we have to look at it, not the other way around.
Yeah, and Brentford, you mentioned dangerous opponent, drew 2-2 the last game, but looking at the game, they had loads of chances. They're not going to come here and sit back, so it makes for a potentially entertaining game.
Yeah, I think they won't sit back. That's not their style, and I think they've become more front foot this year maybe than last year. So as I said, they've got strengths in their team. They've got big strengths that we need to combat, and then as always we need to impose ourselves and our style of play on them. And the crowd are going to be so important for us at the weekend. We're going to really need their support. I thought they're unbelievable for us against Brighton. Can't thank them enough for what they did in that game after a really disappointing result. Thought they were excellent, and hopefully the home crowd can inspire us again.
And if Sandro is missing, is it a case of Sean Longstaff just goes straight back in, or?
It's never that simple. I think we have options, and that's the beauty of having a bit more strength and depth, especially in midfield this year, and we're certainly going to need it.
Okay, Dominic?
Kieran Trippier put in a very strong performance at left back for England the other night. Is that a position you could envisage him playing at club level, despite him being so established in the right back position?
Yeah, Kieran's a versatile player. He's played left back a number of times over the years, especially for England. Never say never. We'll look at everything and try and pick what we think's the best team.
Yeah, and in terms of right backs, Emil Krafth, pitcher back on the grass, just how far away is he at the moment?
Yeah, early steps for Emil, but great to see him back. Brilliant character. He's trained probably 4 or 5 sessions now, and he's got better with each one, and I think the group are really happy to see him with us again. He's got a great mentality, so a vital part of our squad.
In terms of the Champions League squad, were there tough decisions to make in terms of the players you left out of that?
Yeah, very difficult. I think a very difficult situation for me and the club to be in. Really, you have to leave players out of a squad that you don't want to leave anyone out. It's a reward for the whole squad last year, and had to make very tough calls due to the rules and regulations that the Champions League put in place. So they weren't easy conversations, but ones I had to make.
Oscar?
Eddie, on the midfield three of Bruno, Joe and Sandro, do you see it as a perfectly balanced three where all bases are covered, or are there any concerns, particularly from a defensive point of view?
Well, they've all got different qualities, and I think that's not the only midfield three I can pick. You're looking for a balance of qualities. You're looking for it to work within the team structure. I think it can, as proved against Aston Villa. Obviously, it hasn't been so successful from the team's perspective in the last 3 games, so we're constantly looking at how we can improve.
The stats show you suffer quite a lot when Sean's not playing. What is it exactly is it that he provides, and just how much has the team missed him at the start of the season?
Yeah, well, I think the team missed him at the back end of last season, not just the beginning of this. I think he's got unbelievable endurance levels. Fitness-wise, he's an incredible athlete, which is probably sometimes underrated. But also his brain. He's got a very, very good understanding of how we want to play. Positionally, he's very good. And he's got a really good range of passing. So, yeah, Sean's a top player.
Jacob?
Eddie, last year you spoke about the welcome distraction of the Carabao Cup final, and also at that time that led to the worst run of league form. This year, has anything kind of changed as you face a similar situation?
No, I don't think so. Not from my side. I just think we've come up against some good opponents, and we probably haven't been at our very top level. Don't think we've been far off it, but I don't think we've been at our very, very best. And I think against those teams, if you're not, it's much more difficult to win. I don't think there's been necessarily any early season, any distractions that I could pinpoint and say that's cost us in that game. Obviously, we're going into a different period now, so that will be probably more relevant in this next period, but we have to deal with that. That's not going to go away.
And then just in terms of kind of actually how sort of concretely elite environments deal with distraction, is that something in which messaging comes from you? Is it something where you kind of feel that you have to leave it to the players and trust them? How does that actually work? You talk about it quite sort of vaguely, avoiding distraction, but...
Yeah, no, I think a lot comes from us and a lot comes from the players. I think it's a joint thing. I think my messaging is very important. I think my coaching staff messaging is very important. Our daily work's important. You can't escape the media now, so you can't escape necessarily what messages are being put out in that format, but we can definitely control internally some of the things that the players hear.